I started shooting film about 9 years ago, and I've amassed about 7 cameras in that time. It's not huge compared to some collections you might see, but it just sort of built as the hobby sort of built up with it. I was working at a store at the time, sold film, developed film, scanned film, did the whole 9, and eventually I just got sort of curious about it, so I started with my Canon TX. This I got for $40 at Value Village. That was the first place I went when I wanted a film camera. Initially, this one did come with the 50mm FD, but over time that just broke. I don't know exactly what happened to it. I would just try to change the aperture and it would just keep snapping back to wide open, so it wasn't the most usable lens. I tried to fix it myself by just taking it apart, and I completely lost track of what I was doing, and that was sort of the death of the lens, so it's in the garbage. Eventually I scored a 135mm lens off Kijiji for 20 bucks, so I've used the camera a few times, but it's hardly been used since 2015. So the big pro of this camera is that it does have a very solid build to it. It's thick, it's heavy, straight up metal. It has a good feel in the hands. You know, mine's always had a couple dents and dings over it. The shutter speed dial has always just been missing, so I've just always sort of been guessing. At some point I'm either at bulb or I'm at 1/500th, but the light meter in it is still fairly accurate even with modern batteries with higher voltages, so this camera will always be one that I hold special. So the next camera that I ended up picking up was my Canon EOS XS, and saying I picked it up is a little bit of a lie. I actually got this one completely free. A little bit morbid how I ended up getting this camera. The store I was working at, it's common that people will come in and recycle their dead relatives' belongings thinking that they just don't have value anymore. So I ended up with this. I asked my manager, I looked at it, still worked, had a couple expired rolls of Ultramax 400 in there, and I said, hey, can I keep it? And she said, I didn't hear that, but if you'd like to put it in your car, you can go for it. So bought the camera, ran a few rolls through it. Eventually did get the Canon 50mm, the cheap little nifty 50. So that stays on it a lot of the time. It is nice just to have a simple camera. It has a built-in flash, that's nice. I've shot a few photos in the club here and there with it, so it's a good little camera. Something that's nice to carry around. It's small, it's light. I got it for free. Autofocus isn't bad, but the biggest con to it is the battery meter, and it sucks. I don't know if it's just mine in particular, or again, if it's some weird issue with using lithium batteries in these old cameras, but it always tells me that it's full until it's not, and then it's just dead, and that's not super helpful. The third film camera I ever got was my Olympus OM1, and it was kind of the same story as getting my EOS XS. Same thing, someone came in just thinking that this was junk. I took it, manager turned a blind eye, and I figured I would just sort of flip it on eBay. I already have 2 film cameras, why would I need a third? And I think at the time it was going for 130 to 150 bucks Canadian with the OM mount 50mm lens. But I ran a couple of rolls of film through it and I liked it. Biggest advantage is that it does have the 1/1000th shutter speed, so it's an upgrade over the TX. But the EOS XS does do 1/2000th, so there's a very different feel to the cameras. You know, again, fully manual. This one has a lot of automated settings, so there is that. Camera itself and the mirror are both fairly light. Something I didn't mention with the TX is that the mirror is super heavy with that. You can really feel it when you take a picture, but small, compact, quiet. Sometimes I can even jam this in the back of a pair of jeans. So I think I use this the most out of any of my 35mm cameras. Biggest con is, again, the light meter is not very accurate in this because of the higher voltages of lithium batteries. I don't have the little adapter that will make it read correctly, but film has enough latitude that, you know, at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world. And that'd be about the only downside to this camera, but latitude makes up for that inaccuracy, but you can always just sort of guess it. So this is my most recent pickup for film cameras. This is my Canon EOS 650. This was an impulse buy at McBain's because it was only $30, and I bought a roll of film with it that was $36. Great pricing on Portra 800 these days. So it was cheap. I mean, I spent more on the batteries and the film on it, but it's just been a fun camera to have. It shoots at 3 frames per second. I've played around with that a little bit. The light meter in this is not great. I don't know, again, maybe battery thing, but it always seems to be reading about a stop low. So I do mostly use it on aperture priority and throw like the 50mm on it. I have tried the 35 to 80 on it, and the results are pretty pretty okay from it. But yeah, it's an odd camera. I still find myself pulling it out and using it. It's just an impulse buy. It feels solid in the hands. The look of it is really cool. It's a fun little camera, but not one that I really needed. So this is my first medium format camera that I ever picked up. This is a very beat up Yashica D. It's fairly cheap on eBay. I think I got it for like $180 or something like that. Eventually I just wanted to move on to something different than just 35mm. And I just surfed through eBay. I was just looking for something, 6x6 seems like a good option. These are fairly inexpensive. Better than a folding camera though. You could actually, see what you're focusing on. Biggest advantage of the Yashica and most TLR cameras is you can find fairly good deals on them out there. Again, not even $200. And I am speaking in Canadian, so even less American. But you can get cheap deals. The quality on them is still fairly good. The big con on the Yashica D and some of these TLR cameras is the internals reflect a lot of light, so you get sort of this like weird glow haze to it. I think my lens does have a little bit of haze on it. I did do a flocking mod to it. I just added some light seal material to the inside and it greatly reduced it. It's fairly good now. So I still pull it out. The 6x6 format is nice. Something about black and white 6x6 with white borders is just the ultimate combo for this camera. So I find myself when I do print, I like to go black and white. I like to add the white borders. I'll run color rolls through this occasionally, but black and white just feels so right for 6x6. But other than just cons of this one being super beat up, the ground glass on it is fairly dim and that takes a bit of getting used to. I find myself with my, head over it with my hand and everything, just trying to block it out, just double check that I have things in focus. You can get aftermarket ground glass for these and eventually that's something maybe I'll do. They're fairly easy to take apart. It's just, well, mine only has 3 screws, but normally it's 4 and then you can just pop the top off and just slide it out, slide the new one in. So sooner or later that'll happen. The next medium format camera that I picked up is this Mamiya 645. I'll probably just do a whole video on the Mamiya 645. It's a real love-hate relationship with this. I got fairly unlucky with the first one I bought. I bought it off of someone on Kijiji and the body itself was just toast. The winding mechanism broke after running 1 roll of film through it. I ran into an issue with shutter capping. There was a battery that was left in it for probably 20 years or so. It just completely fried and drained the capacitor. So when I got it, the few shots that did come out, there was a whole bunch of shutter capping. I could fix it in Lightroom, but it's just kind of a nightmare. Took it apart to try to fix it because I figured I have nothing to lose, but didn't really get anywhere with that. So what I did is I just kind of kept the accessories, the lens, both viewfinders. Right now I have the waist level viewfinder on it. And I just bought a new body by itself off of eBay. I think that was about 160 bucks. So I went with this option because I wanted to get the RB67, but it just seemed like too much money. So I bought the 645 thinking it'd be close enough. So basically I ended up spending as much as an RB67 would have cost, but I have the 645 for the smaller negative. So joke was kind of on me with that one. I really do like the 645. The photos out of it are super clean. The biggest con is going to come when I finally have to service this camera. It's not too hard to find somewhere that will do a CLA, but if you have shutter capping issues, the number of places that will service that are kind of few and far between. You have to send them to the States, and a lot of places that get recommended on old forum posts or on Reddit, they're either closed or they're just over capacity and they can't service it. So one day this camera will just die and then I'll wish I did just buy an RB67 that's fully mechanical and then I don't have to worry about electronic shutters exploding. I do even have a roll of film in this right now. I have a roll of Reflex Lab 50D in this. I've shot a little bit of ECN2 film and developed it with proper ECN2. I really do love it so far, but I'm gonna have to get some more practice at removing that remjet. That is my biggest issue. The pre-bath is great. I just need a better technique to wipe it off when I hang it to dry. And this is my most recent medium format camera. This is my Moskva 2. It's a Soviet ripoff of a Zeiss camera. It's a 6x9 folding camera. I figured at some point I might as well try. I gained some confidence with zone focusing on the Yashica D, so I thought I would just get one of these. It was like $90 off of eBay, showed up fairly quickly. So I've run a few rolls through this and I'm a little mixed. Some of them turn out fine, sharp, great. But then there are other times where I take a picture and for some reason it just looks like there's tons of motion blur. So I don't know if the shutter is slow on this, if my hands aren't as stable as I thought, or if 1/250th just is not it for 6x9. But when you do get good pictures out of this, you get very good pictures out of this, which is crazy because this camera is from 1949, so it's significantly older than the rest of my cameras. I think the second oldest that I have is the Yashica D. I couldn't date it exactly, but just based on a little bit of research, I believe this one was built in about 1959, but don't quote me on that. Somewhere between 59 to 61 potentially. So that is my small but mighty camera collection. Maybe someday I'll shoot some sports photos or something with the 135 on the TX. That's something I want to try. Done a little bit here and there, but it's pretty difficult with old manual film cameras that don't have the highest shutter speeds. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Maybe, if I do one.